Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Richard and I had been married for 5 years when we decided it was time to expand our family. We first met during a deposition at an insurance company where I worked. Richard was the lead attorney representing the plaintiff, and I was part of the defense team. His sharp mind and relentless ambition made it clear right away that he was on a fast track to partnership and millions on the path to justice. Although I considered myself a capable lawyer, I never thought I was at his level, so I was genuinely surprised when he reached out to me after the case was over. Our relationship blossomed quickly, growing over dinners, late-night cocktails, and various social events. Richard was witty and charismatic, holding my attention with every conversation. Our physical chemistry was just as strong. He was an attentive and inventive lover, and I responded with equal passion. Soon we were married and living in a luxurious gated community among those who had made it. We bought a massive 4-bedroom single-story home, which seemed excessive for just the two of us, but we thought it would allow room to grow, maybe even hire a nanny if I returned to work after having children. Like many young couples with financial success, life seemed perfect. The only real issue we faced was Richard's demanding work schedule. While my job was a simple 9 to 5, Richard was always chasing the next big case to make partner at his firm. This left me with all the social obligations in our prestigious neighborhood, attending barbecues, wine tastings, and other events typical of our close-knit elite community. It was at one of these events that I grew closer to Mary, which eventually led me to meet her husband, Michael. Their relationship sparked my curiosity, and with time on my hands, especially during the last month of my pregnancy, I decided to get to know them better. I didn't hire a private investigator or anything dramatic like that. Instead, I simply became friends with Mary, who, like me, wasn't working at the time. She lived just a couple of houses away, and I felt drawn to their seemingly simple life. It was like a puzzle I wanted to solve. Michael was an accountant with his own small practice. Unlike other men in the neighborhood, who were always networking or flaunting their success, Michael seemed uninterested in expanding his business or forming new connections. He looked like a typical accountant, mid-40s, balding, a bit on the heavier side, but not excessively so. He didn't give the impression of ever being particularly athletic, more of a quiet, scholarly type. He often seemed a little out of place at social gatherings, especially since he didn't participate in typical male activities like golf or drinking. Around women, he was always polite and respectful, but never flirted or was overly friendly. Mary, on the other hand, was the complete opposite of her husband. She was stunning, lively, and flirtatious, with an energy that naturally drew people to her. At 37, she looked even younger, with a figure that caught attention, particularly her voluptuous curves and noticeably enhanced chest. Every movement she made exuded confidence and undeniable sensuality. Despite her flirtatious demeanor, Mary was fiercely loyal to Michael. I saw her lose her composure only twice. Once when a group of men mocked Michael in her presence, and she quickly put them in their place, and another time when a well-known neighborhood playboy tried to hit on her. She made it clear right away that she wasn't someone to mess with. Mary let everyone know that her heart belonged only to Michael. Their love was so strong that it almost annoyed those of us who observed it from the outside. Strangely, Michael didn't seem to realize just how deeply Mary adored him. He treated her with kindness and respect, but didn't notice her fiery devotion the way we did. Maybe he had simply gotten used to it over the years and started taking it for granted. Despite their financial stability, they lived more modestly compared to others in our neighborhood. They had enough money to fit in, but they didn't flaunt it. Their cars were ordinary, and they avoided excessive luxury. No boats, no oversized TVs, no massive home renovations. They had a pleasant backyard with a pool, and their grill was functional but not fancy. I never heard Mary complain about money, even though she didn't wear the latest fashions or adorn herself with jewelry, aside from her wedding band, engagement ring, and a simple pair of gold earrings. It was clear that they had the means for extravagance, but they chose not to participate in the race for flashy wealth that characterized our community. Mary and Michael had 2 children, a 7-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter, both well-behaved and sweet. They hired a nanny to help with the kids and household chores, but Mary remained actively involved in raising them. Their family life seemed ideal in the best sense of the word. Despite living in an environment where material values played a significant role, they appeared genuinely happy without feeling the need to showcase their success. I had always known that Mary's son attended one of the most prestigious private schools, but it never seemed like anything special, especially since he was only 7. Mary handled his daily routines, dropping him off and picking him up. The boy's father was always busy with work, and when needed, a nanny would step in. At the time, I was 8 months pregnant and had taken a break from work. I had gotten used to taking short morning walks to stay active, but tried not to stray too far from home. One morning, during one of these walks, I ran into Mary as she was driving her son to school. We exchanged a few polite words, and I suggested we meet for coffee later. She already had a packed schedule, taking her son to school, going to the gym, and doing some shopping, but she promised to stop by for coffee around noon. I had a feeling something was bothering her, but I didn't expect that today would be the day she opened up. As it turned out, I was wrong. When Mary came by later, coffee in hand, our conversation naturally shifted to children and pregnancy. I casually asked if she and Michael were planning to expand their family. Her response caught me off guard. "That depends on Michael. I'll do whatever he wants. If he wants more children, we'll have them. If not, we won't." As she said this, I noticed her absent-mindedly twirling a small gold earring, a habit I'd seen before whenever she talked about her husband. It was clear that this was a painful topic for her. "But you should also have a say in this decision," I remarked. "We're not living in the 19th century. Michael can't force you to have a child." Mary chuckled softly, but there was a hint of unease in her laugh. "Michael would never do that. He's the kindest person, honestly. I couldn't find a better husband. He would never pressure me. It's just, I'm willing to do anything to make him happy. If that means having more children or not, as long as he's content." "Do you really love him that much?" I asked, surprised by her devotion. "Everyone can see how you treat him, like he's some rare treasure. You're always so attentive, but sometimes I feel like he doesn't fully appreciate everything you do for him." Mary twirled her earring again, a clear sign of her anxiety. "And I hope he never finds out," she muttered under her breath. Her words struck me as odd, so I pressed on. "You don't want him to know how much you care? It's complicated," she whispered almost inaudibly. "Let me ask you a question, Margaret. You're a lawyer, right? If I tell you something in confidence, do you have to keep it secret, like between a lawyer and a client?" "Yes," I replied, "but only if you officially hire me. Are you in some kind of trouble? Is Michael hurting you in any way?" She quickly shook her head. "No, nothing like that. I just need to share something, and I have to be sure no one else will ever know. How do I hire you?" "It's simple," I explained. "You just need to make a small payment, even something symbolic, and we can establish attorney-client privilege." Without hesitation, Mary reached into her bag and pulled out a $20 bill with a smile. "Consider yourself officially hired." Relaxing a bit, Joan leaned back and began her story. "I grew up in this neighborhood. My father was a roofer, but he spent half his earnings at the bar, so we were always living paycheck to paycheck. My mother worked as a hairdresser, but even with her income, we stayed at the lower end of middle class. Between my father's drinking, cheating, and constant fights, I'm honestly surprised I even finished school. After high school, I took some secretarial courses and got a job at a pretty awful agency. I mostly handled paperwork and filled in for employees on short-term contracts. That's when I met Michael. His secretary was going on maternity leave, and I was hired to temporarily replace her." "And when was this?" I asked, curious about the timeline. "About 14 years ago," she replied. "I was 25 then. By that time, I'd already had my share of fun and was starting to think about settling down. Back in those days, I admit I had big plans for a wealthy life. I wanted to marry rich, live with him for a few years, and then leave with enough money to live comfortably. Michael seemed like the perfect candidate. He was 33 at the time, 8 years older than me, and even more naive than he is now. I never considered him particularly wealthy, but he owned his own business, had a nice apartment in a decent area, and seemed to meet all the criteria of an ideal husband. After my work at his company ended, we started dating, and soon I moved in with him. A year later, we got married. Michael was sweet and always accommodating, and I was confident I could manage him as much as I needed to. He trusted me completely and didn't even ask for a prenuptial agreement. I wouldn't say I'm proud of being a gold digger, but I don't have any regrets about it either. So here I am, married for 13 years, and still content. We had a fairly typical engagement. The only condition I set before agreeing to marry was that I wanted us to have our own home, a real house we could call ours. Having lived my whole life in rented apartments, I wanted something permanent. We searched and eventually found the house we live in now. At first I thought the price was too high, but Michael insisted that we needed a spacious place, just in case we had kids. I didn't want children, but I didn't want to disappoint him before the wedding. The most pleasant part for me was that he didn't even blink at the cost and had no problem adding my name to the deed. However, right before the wedding, something happened that seemed insignificant at the time, but later turned out to be a turning point in my life. What was it? Well, shortly after our engagement, Michael suggested having dinner with his old school friend. We went to a small restaurant, one of those cozy places that feels more like someone's warm family home than an ordinary eatery. The atmosphere was intimate, with touches of sophistication. When we arrived, Michael briefly spoke with the maitre d', mentioning the name of the person we were supposed to meet, and suddenly the mood shifted. We were led to the best table, and soon a bottle of premium wine was brought to our table as a complimentary gesture. The service was impeccable. 2 waiters were constantly nearby, making sure everything was perfect. When our dinner was almost over and Michael's friends still hadn't shown up, 2 burly men entered the restaurant, surveyed the room, and sat at some distance from us. One of them left the restaurant briefly and returned with 2 other men, one impeccably dressed about Michael's age, and the other much older. Michael stood up, embraced them, and introduced me to his old friend Oscar and his grandfather, Oscar Garcia. These 2 were nothing like Michael. When I asked him about them later, he simply said Oscar was an old school friend. Their visit was brief. The elder offered a short toast, wishing us all the best before the wedding, and they drank to our future. Oscar gave me a wedding gift, a stunning pair of diamond earrings, which I later found out were worth around $15,000. After a few hugs, they left. None of them came to the wedding, and I didn't see Oscar again for the next 2 years. Life went on in the usual whirlwind of wedding preparations, moving into the new house, buying furniture, and settling into married life. I soon forgot about that dinner entirely. Michael went to work every day, but he didn't seem particularly ambitious. I asked him a few times if he wanted to expand the business or take on more clients, but he was perfectly content with what he had. Money was never an issue. I didn't know how much he had, but whatever purchase came up, the price never seemed to bother him. So how was our married life? Let's just say we found our rhythm. Michael was kind, gentle, and incredibly sweet, but sometimes that's not enough in certain areas of a relationship. Before the wedding, I had been with a few men who enjoyed a bit more passion, something Michael never offered. To be honest, I missed it. At the time, I wasn't ready to leave the marriage, not until I knew for sure how much Michael was worth. But the desire for something more exciting remained. I wasn't about to pursue this desire at home, considering our nosy neighbors, so I signed up for a gym. I genuinely wanted to stay in shape, but I made sure to hire an attractive personal trainer. George, my trainer, was full of energy, putting everything into our workouts, and soon I began looking at him differently. He was half Italian, tall, with a body sculpted like marble. Before long, we began an affair, meeting in hotels a few times a week for passionate encounters. His stamina was incredible, giving me exactly the adrenaline rush I had been missing. Yes, I was cheating. Did Michael ever find out? No, he never did. He remained blissfully unaware, but the way things unfolded in the end was far worse than you can imagine. The whole situation fell apart in the most horrifying way. There was one time when Michael had to go on a business trip for a few days. George and I, taking advantage of his absence, planned to spend the night together at a hotel. It was something new for us. We'd never gone that far before. Usually, we would just carve out a couple of hours during the day when the opportunity arose. But this was supposed to be special. A whole night together. But honestly, I hardly remember anything from that evening. It's as if everything was shrouded in a haze, like we were drugged without even realizing it. The night passed in a blur, and then suddenly men burst into the room, harsh, brutal. They dragged us into a car by force and took us to some abandoned warehouse. I knew George was involved in something shady, maybe steroids, and I assumed that's what had landed us in trouble. I thought I was just an innocent bystander caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. "You mean you were kidnapped?" I asked, feeling my stomach twist in horror. "What happened next? How did you get out of there? Did Michael find out?" She continued, her voice taking on a strange, almost emotionless tone, despite the terror in her story. The way she described it sent chills down my spine. "When the drugs started to wear off," she said, "I realized I was tied to a chair. My wrists and ankles were bound with bandages, probably to avoid leaving marks, and there were more bandages over my mouth so I couldn't scream. It was odd. They were careful not to leave a single bruise on me, but I didn't understand why. But they weren't so gentle with George. They cuffed him and hung him from a rope tied to the ceiling, right in front of me." She paused for a moment, as if gathering the strength to relive those memories again. Two men came in and tore George's shirt off, ripping it at the cuffs. They spread a plastic sheet beneath him and started beating him with chains. Thick, heavy chains. His wrists bled from the way the handcuffs dug into his skin. His screams, he screamed over and over. Her voice faltered for a moment, as if she could still hear those screams in her head. "The screams eventually stopped," she continued, her voice eerily calm. "I think he lost consciousness. His eyes were so swollen they were completely shut." Her hands trembled slightly as she took a deep breath. "Then they brought in a forklift. They threw him into a barrel, sealed it, and rolled it away." I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process the horrors she was describing. She paused for a moment before continuing. "After that, I blacked out. When I woke up, I was still tied to the chair. Across from me in another chair sat Oscar. He's a friend of Michael's. One of the men came up to me, removed the gag, and freed one of my hands. I just sat there, too stunned to react in any way. Oscar offered me a flask. I took a sip and coughed as the alcohol burned my throat. It was strong, but I needed it. The warehouse was freezing, and I wasn't dressed for the cold. The alcohol gave me a little warmth. Then Oscar spoke, his voice unsettlingly calm. "Mary, we need to talk, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Can you do that?" I nodded. What else could I do? Oscar asked, "Does Michael know about the man you're seeing?" "No," I replied. "I've been careful. Michael doesn't know anything." Then he asked if there was any chance I was pregnant by George. "No," I quickly assured him. "I'm on birth control. I'm not ready for kids." "And Michael knows about that?" Oscar's tone hadn't changed, but there was a new coldness in his eyes. "No," I whispered. "He doesn't." "Mary, do you really love your husband? Do you believe you can give him the happiness he deserves?" Without hesitation, she replied, "Yes, I love him, and I know I can make him happy." I was about to continue, but he raised his hand to stop me. "You may not realize it," he began slowly, "but your husband is one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. If he wanted to, he could be a brilliant writer or even a famous scientist. His financial acumen is unmatched, yet he runs a modest office with only a few clients." He paused briefly before adding, "Among his clients are my family, a few trusted friends, and some of our business partners. But there's another side, one more dangerous. Very powerful groups in this country also use his services. Michael is incredibly talented, but perhaps because of that, he has certain peculiarities. We accept that. All we want is his happiness. Many people care deeply about his well-being, and as you've seen today, some are willing to go to extreme lengths to ensure his happiness." His gaze narrowed as he continued. We believe you're part of that happiness. You can make him happy, can't you? I know I can, I said quietly. I love Michael deeply. Excellent. Let's be frank with each other. I speak with Michael often, and he's madly in love with you. He sees you as the perfect wife, the future mother of his children. I don't want that image shattered. We both know you're after his money, but what you don't understand is that his fortune is far greater than what you've seen. If you're planning to get close to him, know this. There are many people who won't let you touch him. They'll do whatever it takes to protect him. He shifted slightly in his chair. Soon, my people will make sure you return home safely. There's no need for Michael to know about this conversation. Leaning closer, he added, wait a month. When you're sure, stop taking the pills. Give Michael the family he's always dreamed of. Can you do that? Yes, I can, I whispered. Good, he said, his voice turning cold. I don't want to see you again. If we meet again, it will end badly for you. There are many ways to die, from a road accident to a botched robbery, and Michael will never know the truth. But before that, you'll experience a real nightmare. So don't give me a reason to interfere in your life again. And most importantly, don't do anything that could upset Michael. A menacing silence hung between us. I sat in a stupor, too stunned to say anything. Meanwhile, Mary seemed almost satisfied as she told her story. She finished. Michael never found out. I made sure of that. Since then, every day I do everything I can to make him happy, because my life depends on it. She paused before adding, a month later I received a package. Inside were these earrings. She pointed to the earrings she was wearing, and a card signed by Oscar. I wear them every day, so I never forget. Intrigued, I asked, what's the meaning behind these earrings? She carefully removed one and handed it to me. A small pendant hanging from it was an intricately crafted golden replica of a 55-gallon barrel, stunning in its detail. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. This was our last argument before heading to court, right after Barbara was served the divorce papers. We were both playing our parts, like actors on a stage. I pretended I wanted to work things out and save the marriage, but in reality, the moment I saw the photograph of her kissing Bradley Jacobson, I knew our 35-year marriage was over. It was already decided, and when I watched the first few minutes of the private investigator's video, I mentally buried our relationship for good. I wasn't sure what Barbara was pretending. Maybe she thought we could still discuss her ongoing affair, or maybe she believed we could come to some agreement where she could stay married to me while continuing her relationship with Bradley. Barbara Smith, my wife, a lawyer, and Bradley, one of her assistants. Barbara's professionalism lay in her ability to make irrational things seem rational, an ability she clearly brought home from work. At home, she used this skill freely. Oscar, be reasonable, was her favorite phrase throughout our 35-year marriage. But after I filed for divorce, she came up with a new favorite, fragile male ego. For example, Oscar, it's not about who I'm seeing or not seeing. It's about your fragile male ego. I began to hate that phrase, so it wasn't surprising that our last conversation didn't last long before she said it again. Oscar, if you could just deal with your fragile male ego, you'd see that none of this threatens you. She smiled warmly, as if trying to reassure me. I don't love him, and in a few months, this will all be over. We can still have our happy ending. You had to give Barbara credit for her boldness. She said all this while absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her wine glass with her fingers. On the kitchen table beside her lay a manila folder containing the divorce papers and incriminating photos from the investigator. But Barbara was still talking about being reasonable, as if I could just set aside my fragile male ego and save our marriage. The problem was that Barbara thought we were still negotiating, while I had already mentally checked out. I just wanted it all to end. Barbara, can we pause for a moment? I interrupted her mid-sentence. You keep mentioning my fragile male ego, and that if I could just get over it, everything would be fine. What exactly do you mean by that? She stopped, frowning slightly, clearly annoyed by my interruption. It's simple, Oscar. You're afraid of competition. You're worried you won't measure up. She smiled, this time with a hint of pity. But don't worry, you're still my man. And Bradley? I asked, watching her blush slightly. Bradley? She hesitated for a moment before responding. Bradley is just a distraction, like a gym membership. I'm not replacing you or stopping loving you. There's nothing for you to worry about. I looked at her with mild bewilderment, the kind of expression husbands use when they want their wives to feel superior, usually to deflect attention. So, just to be clear, you think I'm afraid that you'll stop loving me or replace me with someone younger? She nodded, her smile growing wider. And you think that makes me insecure? That I need support? I asked, dragging out the words as if trying to grasp something. Exactly, darling, there's nothing to worry about, she repeated, patting my hand in a patronizing gesture. And this insecurity is because I'm a man? I asked, barely containing my irritation. Oh, Oscar, it's not just about you, she said, her smile now triumphant. All men have fragile egos. It's our job as wives to help you stay confident so you remain stable. I wanted to explode, to demand an explanation of how a relationship with a 35-year-old could support me, but I knew that if I gave in to my emotions, she would only dig her heels in further. Barbara suddenly became fascinated with this nonsense from popular psychology about how women are stronger than men, and it didn't surprise me at all. We had been avoiding these topics for years, but I was exhausted. We were nearing the end of our road, and I was tired of pretending to agree. Barbara, you've been talking about this for a long time now, I said, looking her straight in the eye, and I've been turning a blind eye. After 35 years together, I've learned to pick which battles to fight. But today, if I wanted her to remember one thing, it would be this. This whole argument was complete absurdity. She tried to interrupt me, but I wasn't going to let her throw me off. The reason people talk about the fragile male ego is because it's truly unusual. You've seen the videos. How often have you seen a man get hit in his most vulnerable spot? She nodded, acknowledging the truth of my words. For a moment I thought she might back down, but I knew her better than that. Often, she admitted. Exactly, I continued. And it seems funny, at least from a woman's point of view, because men appear so strong, but one hit can take us down, and we're left writhing, gasping for air. Do you understand what I'm saying? I asked. She nodded again, but I wasn't going to stop. Now, imagine if a woman were hit in the same way. Nobody would laugh, right? She agreed. Why not? If one person's pain seems funny, why isn't the other's? Because it's cruelty, she answered. When a man hits a woman, it's cruelty. And when a woman hits a man, isn't it? I shook my head. Forget it. That's not the point. The point is, we don't laugh when a woman is hurt because society tells us women are fragile, weak. So when a woman cries, nobody finds it funny. She looked puzzled, so I pressed on. It's the same with ego. At work, my friends constantly joke about my job, my body, my hair, anything they can find, and I just let it pass. Now imagine if your friends did that to you. Imagine going to work every day and they constantly point out your most painful insecurities. How would you feel? Oh God, she said, horrified. I can't imagine women doing that to each other. Definitely not all the time. Exactly. But that's what we strong men do. We laugh it off, make jokes, and move on. I patted her hand lightly, unsure if she caught the hint of condescension in my voice. The truth is, the only place I allow myself to be fragile, vulnerable, is here, at home. Here, I lower my defenses, take off the armor, and show my soft side, hoping you won't take advantage of it. What you call my fragile male ego is just my willingness to be vulnerable in the one place I feel safe. Do you understand? Barbara smiled and nodded, but I could see she was already preparing to argue. Yes, Oscar, she said. Here you're safe. You can be vulnerable. I'm not going to destroy what we've built over some meaningless affair. I sighed, taking off my glasses and pinching the bridge of my nose. You still don't get it, Barbara. I believed you when you said I was the best lover you've ever had. even though I knew that couldn't be true. How could it be? I've only had one partner in 35 years. I forced a weak smile. I believed you when you said I was enough for you, that my size was perfect, that my body still excited you. I took you at your word, even when I knew you were just flattering my ego. I chose to trust you, to be vulnerable with you, because I thought you wouldn't betray that trust. But you did, I shouted, slamming my hand on the table. Barbara's eyes widened in shock, and she fell silent. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. It's been about a year since I started noticing how carelessly you've been treating my vulnerability. The way you reacted when I undressed, how you averted your eyes in moments of intimacy, it was impossible to ignore. And those comments you made, which seemed like innocent suggestions about how I should go to the gym more often or drink less beer, I heard every one of them. She looked at me, stunned, but I didn't stop. I began to notice changes in our connection. You stopped sharing the little details of your day and stopped asking about mine. You were around less and less. Even before Bradley came into the picture, I already felt that you were no longer the safe place you used to be. You were no longer the one who protected my feelings. I paused, feeling a tightness in my throat. She, a lawyer, had lost her words? I kept my gaze fixed on hers, not looking away. Her eyes glistened, and I knew mine did too. But I held back the tears. Barbara, I tried. I really tried. I took you to dinner more often, complimented your outfits. I planned trips for just the two of us, made time for us to be together. I did everything I could to remind you how much you meant to me. I dressed better, started working out again. I hoped it would bring back memories, remind you of how important I used to be to you. I looked at my hands, fighting back tears again. Not now. I couldn't let her see me break. I couldn't afford to be vulnerable anymore. But nothing worked. It wasn't enough. You always had reasons to cancel our dinners, explanations for why we couldn't go on trips. When I told you how beautiful you looked, I saw in your eyes that you were thinking about whether I knew you were dressing for him. And when I sent flowers to your office, your silence was deafening. I looked at her again. Later, when you started picking fights just to avoid spending time with me, I knew I had lost. You forgot that I was once special to you, and as a result, you lost that special place in my heart too. I never used arguments as a reason to avoid intimacy. I sighed in frustration. Seriously? Was that all she took away from this? Barbara, why can't you be honest? If not with me, then at least with yourself. For the past year, you've been pushing me away. She shot me a quick glance, then lowered her eyes to her hands again, hands that still felt so familiar to me. I shrugged slightly. Yeah, back then my ego was fragile. I spent a lot of time in my office mourning the slow death of what we had. I tried to hold on, to create the appearance of strength, the same strength I show at work, so you wouldn't see how much you had hurt me. I started finding reasons to avoid home, to avoid someone who seemed determined to hurt me without bothering to hide it. She looked shocked, and I smiled slightly, lightly touching her hand. But you'll be glad to know my fragile ego has healed. I've filled my life with new things, found people who made me feel valued again. She looked up, and I saw a glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. I couldn't help but smirk. No, I didn't cheat on you, but I did notice that some of the women at the gym were less annoyed by my presence. When I gathered enough evidence and started talking to a lawyer, you had no idea how shattered my fragile ego had been. Is that it? I thought so. I'd said everything I needed to, and for the first time I believed she finally heard me. Maybe now we could find a way to move forward. But of course I was married to a lawyer. For her, there are no lost cases. Oscar, that wasn't necessary, she shouted. Yes, I was distracted, I admit it. But I never stopped loving you. In my heart you were always number one. I'm sorry I didn't realize how much I was hurting you, how fragile you were. Barbara kept talking, painting vivid pictures with her words, but I had already stopped listening. The word, fragile, surfaced again. She still didn't understand, and I suddenly realized she probably never would. I wasn't going to soften the blow anymore. Barbara, stop, I said sharply. I knew she could hear the irritation in my voice, despite my attempts to suppress it. I took a slow, deliberate breath. You really don't get it, do you? You're convinced this is about me about my fragility, about some fragile male ego, right? There's nothing wrong with that, I continued, keeping my tone steady. Everyone, men, women, has an ego that's fragile to some extent. We all rely on those we love to protect it. But yes, men can be particularly sensitive in this area. I leaned forward, holding back the sarcasm that was ready to burst out, though she certainly wasn't making it easy for me. Let me tell you a little secret. Barbara, for most of our 35 years, I've been careful with the truth when it came to you. When you asked if that lipstick was right or if that dress was too tight, I had to find words that told the truth without hurting you. I didn't want you going out looking like a clown, or worse, something else. Her face flushed, her eyes widened at the bluntness of my words. She clearly wasn't used to this level of honesty, and I couldn't help but find it slightly amusing. Barbara, when I said things like, I don't think that shade of lipstick matches your top, or maybe you should change, I don't want the neighbors talking about your cleavage, I wasn't hesitating or unsure. I was giving you a chance to reconsider without crushing your self-esteem. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Do you know why I did that? She shook her head, visibly confused. Because I didn't want to hurt your ego. That's absurd, she snapped, her face twisting in anger. I can remember plenty of times when you didn't hold back at all. I chuckled. I admit, I wasn't perfect. We both remember the time I said your eyeshadow made you look like a streetwalker, or when I agreed the dress wasn't exactly flattering on you. Her eyes darkened at the memory, that famous cold silence that followed with a sarcastic, thanks for your honesty. And of course, the weeks of icy distance between us. It was then that I realized that blunt honesty wasn't always the best approach, especially when it came to my opinion of your appearance. So you've been lying to me for 35 years, Barbara shot back, her voice filled with fury. It was time to end this conversation. Let's call it an edited version of the truth. I told you that you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, that your workouts made you look younger by a few years, that even Venus would envy your figure. I gave you the same lavish compliments you gave me. It was my way of showing how I saw you, and yes, maybe a little bit to protect your ego too. My ego isn't fragile, she snapped, clearly insulted. Barbara, I said, looking her directly in the eyes, you have a big ass. Her reaction was instant. Shock froze on her face, as if she'd been struck in the chest. What? I smiled, though my words were harsh. You have stretch marks. Your breasts aren't as firm as they used to be. Your hair is starting to gray, and your teeth aren't as white as they once were. Those expensive creams you buy don't hide the wrinkles or your double chin. Maybe it's time to accept aging gracefully because fighting it isn't working anymore. Her mouth dropped open, her eyes widened in disbelief. Every word hit exactly where I wanted it to. Oh my God, Oscar, she whispered, utterly stunned. Barbara, remember the feeling you have right now? Think about it, I said, giving her a moment to process. Now imagine if I told you I was sleeping with a young woman from work, someone 5, maybe 15 years younger than you. She has a toned body, full breasts, and she's putting her all into the relationship. It's fresh, and she's giving it all her energy. Imagine me coming home to you after seeing her a couple of times a week. How's your ego now? Maybe it's a little fragile too. Barbara's face turned pale. Yes, she muttered, her voice barely audible. You never truly understood, I began, and my words carried the weight of the moment. I was never blind to the truth. I know you're not the most beautiful woman in the world. To be honest, I could walk out right now and, without much effort, find several women whom many would consider more attractive. I glanced at her, but she didn't lift her eyes. Her head bowed in silence as tears rolled down her cheeks. You're not the most beautiful, not the smartest, and not even the funniest. But to me, you were all of that. In my eyes, you were everything. Where others might see flaws, I saw the life we've lived together. Your breasts aren't as firm anymore because they nourished our children. Your body has changed because it carried them into the world. The lines on your face came from the laughter and joy we've shared together. When I looked at you, I saw our entire life etched on your body. Every scar, every change, It all told the story of the years we've walked hand in hand, and I cherished every detail. Slowly, she raised her head, her face twisted in pain, as if bracing for the final crushing blow. And now? What do you see now? God help me, I thought. She's literally asking me to say the cruel words she's expecting. It would be so easy. A part of me, a large part of me, wanted to deliver that final destructive blow, the blow that would break her so completely that she'd spend years trying to rebuild her self-esteem, seeking comfort elsewhere. And yet there she stood, chin raised, ready for it. But here's the thing. It's no longer about delivering the final blow, and it's not just about Barbara anymore. She looked in the mirror, saw time slipping away, and decided she could escape it by running into the arms of a younger man. And when everything collapsed, she tried to hold her head high, throwing challenges and sharp words. But now we both understand. She's fragile, small, and soon she'll be alone. As for me, I've already cried my tears, alone in the car at a quiet park not far from home. For months I wore a mask of indifference, silently mourning the slow, inevitable death of our marriage, all while living in the same house with a woman who had betrayed me. Now it was time to figure out what to do next with my life. The first question was simple. Who did I want to see in the mirror every day? A man who unleashed his anger when the chance came. A man who claimed an empty victory over a broken woman who had already destroyed her own life? A bully? No. I wanted to be the man I knew I could be, a man capable of mercy, kindness, and honesty. I took a deep breath and gently placed my hand on Barbara's. What do I see now? I repeated her question softly. Now I see the woman I spent the best years of my life with. I see the one I trusted with my heart, until I couldn't anymore. I gently squeezed her hand, softly and tenderly. I see a woman I will miss. She slowly stood, trying to smile, though her lips trembled. The smile couldn't hide the tears still streaming down her face. It doesn't have to end like this, she said, her voice shaking. We can still fix this, find our way back. I sighed heavily. No, Barbara, we can't. You were right about one thing, I continued. I'm not fragile, but my trust was, and I can't put myself in that vulnerable position again. I can't let you back in. Yes, we could stay together, sleep in the same bed, go on trips, make new memories, but I'd always wonder. Wonder about what? She whispered. I'd wonder if you were judging me, comparing me to someone else. I'd wonder if you stayed out of love or just because it was easier. That's not fair, she whispered. I'm not going to live like that, I finished, my voice firm and final. I believe I have several decades of life ahead of me, and the thought of spending them with someone I don't trust is unbearable. I'm not ready to accept a life where I have to pretend to feel safe and comfortable when those emotions aren't real. I know I deserve better. If you truly loved me, you wouldn't want me to go through this. No one should. Despite all of Barbara's legal experience, I could always see through her, especially at moments like this. I watched her mind at work, selecting arguments, testing them in her head to figure out which might work. But then I noticed that precise moment when she realized it was over. Her eyes dimmed, as if something inside her had extinguished. From that point, she decided not to resist any longer. After that, the divorce process went quickly. We exchanged jewelry for tools, a television for furniture, and I got my partially restored car. In the end, we sold the house, split everything equally, and avoided major legal expenses. But a divorce doesn't end with just signing papers. I still see Barbara often, at our kids' birthdays, family gatherings, and during the holidays. She's changed a lot. The confidence in her eyes is gone. She's gained a lot of weight, and she even started dressing poorly. She's lost her self-esteem, and yes, I'm partly to blame, but she deserved it. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. It was an insignificant detail that initially seemed trivial, and David barely paid attention to it. He had left town for work, as he occasionally did, and, as usual, shared with Megan, his wife, the detailed itinerary of his trip. In turn, Megan had given him her schedule. After so many years of marriage, this had become routine for both of them. David, known for his cheerful and friendly personality, worked as a negotiator and problem solver in his company. Although he didn't travel often, a few business trips per year were part of his routine. This particular trip was scheduled to last an entire week, and he didn't expect to return until Saturday. He planned to take a 10:15 p.m. flight that night, arriving late after midnight. Not wanting to disturb Megan, he insisted she not pick him up from the airport. He intended to take a shuttle that would drop him home around 2:30 a.m. on Sunday. However, on Thursday morning, an unexpected turn of events occurred. The negotiations he had been involved in concluded much earlier than expected. The deal was signed before noon, and his business partners had to rush off to attend to other matters. Seeing the opportunity to return home early, David rescheduled his flight. By 2:45 p.m., he was already seated on the plane, ready to fly back. During the flight, David decided to call Megan to let her know he'd be home earlier than planned. Using the in-flight phone, he dialed her mobile, but, as expected, she didn't answer. She was at work. Determined to reach her, he started searching his briefcase for her office number and called there. "Jensen, Sharon and Anderson, how may I direct your call?" greeted the secretary. "Hi, can I speak to Jennifer?" David asked, referring to Megan's secretary who usually took his calls. "I'm sorry, but Jennifer won't be in today or tomorrow. Is there something I can help you with?" the secretary responded, maintaining a friendly tone. Slightly confused, David said, "In that case, may I speak with Mrs. Conroy? May I ask who's calling?" The secretary's voice became a bit more cautious. "It's her husband," David replied. After a brief pause, the secretary returned to the conversation. "I'm afraid Mrs. Conroy is currently busy. I'm not sure when she'll be available. Would you like to leave a message?" David hesitated for a moment. "No, that's fine. I'll talk to her at home tonight. Just let her know I called." He hung up the phone, but the conversation left him feeling uneasy. Only about half an hour later did he realize what had been bothering him. Megan had told him the night before that she would be in the office all day. While it was possible she was busy or in a client meeting, something about Jennifer's absence troubled him. Jennifer rarely missed work unless Megan did as well, and even then, it was usually planned in advance. The fact that neither Megan nor Jennifer were in the office seemed odd to him. When David landed, the flight was precisely on time. By 7:30 p.m. he was home, but the house was dark. It was unusual for Megan not to be home. She typically returned earlier than him. He began his usual routine, unpacking his suitcase, tossing his clothes into the laundry basket, and changing into something more comfortable. By 9 p.m., with no sign of Megan, he decided to make himself a simple grilled cheese sandwich. Settling in front of the TV, he tried to distract himself, but the anxiety continued to build. Could something have happened to her? If there had been an emergency, surely someone would have informed him. Unable to shake the growing concern, David began pacing around the house. He tried calling her mobile again, but this time the call went straight to voicemail. Her phone was turned off. Strange, he thought. Why would she have it turned off? By 10 p.m., his worry had turned into real anxiety. Just then, his phone rang. He quickly answered, feeling a wave of relief at hearing Megan's voice on the other end. "I was starting to worry," she said with a hint of concern in her voice. "As usual, I called the hotel after dinner, and they told me you had already checked out." "Is everything going smoothly?" she asked. "Yes, just a few changes in plans," he replied. "Where are you now?" he continued. "At home, actually. I just finished cleaning up the kitchen. It's unusually quiet in the house today," he said, looking around the empty space. "You will come back on Sunday as we agreed, right?" she asked, hope evident in her voice. "Absolutely. I'll be here all day on Sunday," he assured her. "We moved all the meetings to the company's main office this morning. You can reach me on my mobile if needed," he added, his gaze lingering on the dimly lit, silent kitchen. The absence of her presence weighed on him, and the dirty dishes from dinner were stacked high in the sink. "Did anything strange happen today?" I tried calling you at the office this afternoon, he pressed. No, not really. I was probably talking to John Sanchez at the time, she replied, sounding distracted. John's been helping me sort out the Melrose account all week, she explained with a tone David couldn't quite decipher. Honestly, I owe him for it. Well, my love, once we wrap up the account, I think they'll offer me a partnership. Mr. Jensen practically confirmed it. Megan's excitement was evident. That's just fantastic. We'll have to celebrate, he said, though his words lacked enthusiasm. Sorry I can't be with you today to start celebrating. Don't worry. We'll celebrate when you come back on Sunday, she reassured him. Please don't be late, she added softly. I miss you. The bed feels so empty without you. They talked a little more, mostly about household matters, before ending the call. After hanging up, David sat in silence, the weight of Megan's lies pressing on him. A knot of nausea formed in his stomach, leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. Until that evening, he had always believed their marriage was solid and their love unshakable. Now, he wasn't so sure. David couldn't sleep for a long time, tossing and turning, trying to find peace in the same bed Megan had described as lonely. He finally drifted off, but by 7 in the morning, he was awake again, staring at the ceiling, feeling empty. By 10, reality hit him. Megan wasn't planning to come home. He picked up the phone and called her office. When the secretary answered instead of Jennifer, he casually asked, "Can I speak with Mrs. Conroy?" "I'm sorry, Mrs. Conroy is unavailable at the moment," the secretary replied. "That's all right, it's not urgent. I'll try again Monday morning," he said, keeping his tone steady. "Great! Mrs. Conroy will be in the office at 9 a.m. on Monday. You can call then," the secretary added cheerfully. David had heard enough. Hanging up the phone, he gathered the necessary information from Megan's files, got into the car, and drove away. They rarely used this SUV, saving it for trips to the mountains or towing the camping trailer. No one in their social circle knew about the vehicle. Leaving his sedan behind, he drove to Megan's office. Slowly circling the parking lot, he confirmed his suspicions. Her car wasn't there. His heart sank as he left the parking lot and headed to the address in her files, which led to John Sanchez's house. The home was in an upscale neighborhood, surrounded by tall pines and hidden behind a tall red brick wall. As he slowly drove past, he spotted Megan's car parked by the garage, out of sight from the main driveway. His vision blurred with emotion, and he pulled over, forcing himself to calm down. After a few minutes, he wiped away his tears. David continued driving, heading downtown where he stopped at a small cafe for breakfast. It was already 11:50 a.m. when he sat down and ordered Belgian waffles and tea. His stomach was too upset for coffee, and he wasn't sure he could eat the waffles, but he forced himself to take slow, deliberate bites, finishing the meal in an hour. He paid and left the cafe, still feeling a heavy weight on his heart. Unable to resist, he drove past Sanchez's house again. Megan's car was still in the same spot. He aimlessly drove around the city for another hour before returning once more. Her car hadn't moved. Resigned, David returned home, his mind swirling with thoughts of betrayal. As time passed, he reflected on the broken parts of their marriage and the life he once cherished. The day slipped away in agonizing, empty contemplation. He couldn't shake one question. Would he ever find a way to smile again? He was so exhausted that he didn't have the energy to prepare a proper meal, instead snacking on whatever he could find, snacks, fruit juices, soda, whenever he felt hungry. His otherwise uneventful evening was interrupted by a phone call from Megan at 10:45 p.m., just as he was about to go to bed. She once again complained about something she had mentioned many times before, telling him how large and empty their bed felt without him. David quietly smirked, trying to mask the fatigue in his voice, and replied that she really didn't understand how lonely a big bed could feel. Puzzled, Megan began to ask him what he meant. David brushed off her question, acknowledging her loneliness and agreeing that it must be hard to sleep alone. He reassured her of his love before ending the call. However, as the night slowly approached midnight, he still couldn't bring himself to get into bed. Thoughts swirled in his head that he couldn't quiet. Did she truly love him? Was she punishing him for something he didn't remember? No, it wasn't about him. It was about her. But what was it? What was bothering her? And most importantly, could he fix it? Was he even capable of fixing it? He spent the night tossing and turning, once again unable to sleep. When morning came, he still felt as restless as he had the night before. By 7 a.m., he sat in the dimly lit living room, the curtains tightly drawn. Around 9 a.m., he heard a familiar sound, Megan's car pulling into the garage. A few minutes later, Megan entered through the door connecting the garage to the kitchen, carrying a small bag of belongings. From his dark leather chair, David silently observed her. She was wearing a plaid skirt and a sleeveless red blouse, the top buttons undone. Her face looked calm, almost content, as she moved through the kitchen. Around her neck hung the necklace he had given her on their 5th anniversary, its soft gleam catching the rare rays of light that made it into the room. As she passed the sink, she stopped abruptly, her gaze landing on the pile of dirty dishes. David hadn't bothered to clean up after breakfast, or even put away the glasses from the night before. Her eyes shifted to the kettle still on the stove, water inside heating up. Megan's face showed signs of concern as she scanned the kitchen. She moved cautiously, her steps slow and deliberate, as the dim light enveloped the room. She stopped at the entrance to the dining room, her eyes taking in the heavy curtains covering the sliding glass doors that led to the patio. Her eyes seemed to search for something in the room. Finally, she set her bag down on a chair and hesitantly stepped into the living room, heading toward the fireplace. Picking up the fire poker, she turned toward the room, and her gaze finally landed on David. He sat silently, lifting a cup of tea to his lips. Megan gasped, her hand flying to her chest in shock. "Oh my God, David, you scared me. When did you come home?" Her voice trembled, a mixture of fear and surprise. David let the silence hang in the air, the tension growing. Although only a few moments had passed, it felt like an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice, once warm, was now cold and distant. "A few days ago." Megan's knees buckled, and she collapsed into the chair across from him, her face frozen in shock. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call? Where were you?" she stammered. David took another slow sip of tea, his tone cold and devoid of emotion. "I called, Thursday afternoon. You weren't home, and you weren't at the office. Jennifer wasn't there either." He paused, letting the silence fill the space between them once again before continuing. "I was here, sitting in this chair when you called. I spent the night in that big, empty bed you were talking about." Outside, life went on. A car drove by, children argued in the distance, and a dog barked. Inside, the living room felt suffocating, the heavy blinds and curtains barely letting any light in. The only other sound was Megan's quiet sobs. Her crying was barely audible as David took another sip of tea, his voice remaining impassive. "Somehow, I doubt the bed you've been sleeping in the past 2 nights has been that empty. Don't you think it's time to tell me what's really going on, Megan? Can you explain what happened?" Megan's sobs grew louder, her hands covering her face as she shook her head in denial. "David, I love you," she sobbed. "It's not about us, David. Please try to understand that. I felt like I had no other choice. This isn't a reflection on us or my love for you." David stared at her, his face frozen in shock. "How can you say that, Megan? How can something that feels like betrayal not affect our relationship?" "I didn't feel like I had a choice," Megan whispered. "John helped me when I was in a terrible situation. I had to repay him somehow, but that doesn't change how I feel about you. My love for you remains the same." David stayed silent for a while. He slowly took a sip of his tea, allowing the silence to stretch between them. Then, after a pause, he stood up and asked calmly, "Do you need anything from the kitchen?" Megan just shook her head without lifting her gaze. Returning to his seat, David leaned forward, his expression intense. "Tell me, why did you feel so indebted to Sanchez that you broke your promises to me? Did he demand something in return for helping with the Melrose case?" Megan's eyes widened in surprise. "No, David. It wasn't like that at all. He didn't force me, and he didn't expect anything in return. He helped because he cared, because he knew I wasn't at fault. He would never have asked for something like that. David took a deep breath, rubbing his temples in frustration. Then why, Megan? Why did you offer him something so personal if he didn't ask for it? What am I missing? It wasn't like that, Megan insisted again. I've told you before, this isn't about us. I felt like he deserved something for his kindness. David's face darkened. Did I fail you somehow? Is this something I did that pushed you to this? No! Megan's voice trembled, rising. I've told you so many times it's not your fault. I had to find a way to thank him for what he did. His help with Melrose wasn't just for me, it was for both of us. I wasn't thinking about myself. It wasn't about my feelings for you. The room fell into silence again before David spoke slowly. Megan, if you're so defensive about how I'm describing it, does that mean that you enjoyed it? The silence that followed was almost unbearable. After a long pause, David broke it again. Do you remember how I always told you that I belonged only to you, and you told me the same? How many times did you promise that you were mine, and I never needed to ask? Do you remember how deeply I believed we were meant for each other? Megan's voice trembled as she replied, David, I still believe that. I belong to you. David's tone was frighteningly calm, though his voice wavered slightly. Then how can you claim that this has nothing to do with us, Megan? You gave him the most precious thing, the thing that meant everything to me, and now you've shared it with someone else. Megan's face twisted in grief, but David didn't stop. His voice was filled with disbelief as he continued. You say this man didn't even ask for what you gave him? By your own words, he didn't expect it. Did you have to persuade him? And then you say this has nothing to do with me? Tears streamed down Megan's cheeks and she sobbed. David, this doesn't change who I am. I love you, I'm still yours. Nothing has changed. David's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he spoke, his voice barely controlled. Megan, everything changes us. Every choice we make, everything that happens to us leaves a mark. You spent 2 nights with another man, sharing something that should only exist between people who love each other. His voice trembled, and he paused to regain his composure. How many nights, Megan? Only 2? Or were there more? The silence that followed was suffocating, David's words hanging in the air as he struggled to keep his emotions in check. David's voice became cold and distant again. God help me, Megan. I can't stop thinking about how many others might have had what should have belonged only to me. You say you belong to me, but without realizing it, you expose yourself. Megan shook her head sharply, her body trembling as deep sobs took over. She couldn't respond with words, only denying his accusations through her tears. Her posture seemed to collapse inward. Her shoulders slumped, her elbows rested heavily on her knees, and her face was buried in her hands, with her hair falling over her face. Time seemed to drag on slowly. David remained motionless, lost in his thoughts, while his wife seemed to shrink further into the chair opposite him. The room was filled with soft, dim light, and the only sounds came from outside, neighbors enjoying the sunny day. Inside, only Megan's muffled sobs broke the silence, until the clock on the mantel softly chimed noon. Megan, David spoke again, this time in a softer tone. I don't know where we go from here. I love you just as much as I did when I left last week. But I feel lost. You keep saying your betrayal has nothing to do with me, but you don't understand how heavy what you've done really is. He paused, letting the silence fill the space between them before continuing. My trust in you is shattered, and I have no idea how to rebuild it, if that's even possible. And if you're hinting that I should betray you in return to balance things out, then we're already done. First of all, if my loyalty means so little to you, it shows how little you value me. And secondly, 2 wrongs don't make a right. 2 wrongs only make things worse, he added quietly. He slowly rose from his chair, carefully placed his empty cup on the mantel, and walked toward the dining room. Pulling the curtains aside, he gazed at their perfect sunlit backyard. His next words were barely audible, and Megan had to strain to hear them. Megan, I want to shake you so hard that your teeth rattle. He sighed heavily. I never wanted to hurt a woman, especially you, my wife, the woman I love. And now, Meeting with John Sanchez is a bad idea, no matter how much you insist that you started everything with him. Megan quietly sobbed, perhaps in protest, but David continued. You say it wasn't his idea, but now that he has you without putting in any effort, do you think he won't expect it again? He paused, letting his words sink in. No matter what you say to him, he sees you as available. Maybe he doesn't think you're available to everyone, but he knows you're available to him. It's easy for him now, and soon he'll stop. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.